In that year, the resulting squash will just look like the parent and resemble the parent in every way. But if it's cross-pollinated, the plant that grows from the seed of that plant will be a hybrid. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I'd do a quick video today talking about seed saving and just speaking to the pitfalls. I mean, I'll talk about the benefits as well, but basically I had my seed saving backfire this year, so I thought I would speak to that a little bit. And maybe it didn't backfire, I don't know, but anyway, let's talk around a little bit. So there are many positive reasons to want to save seeds, right? You're saving money on the cost of seeds. It's a very sustainable, self-reliant sort of thing to do. It's a wonderful feeling to know that you're sort of self-contained and you don't need the store to grow food and that sort of thing. It's a great thing to show kids. I always just take a childlike fascination in taking the seeds and saving them and planting them next year. And also there's the argument that, saving the seeds year after year after year, growing on your own property, you're gradually developing a variety or cultivar that, is well suited to the growing conditions where you are. There's all those positive arguments for doing it, and I agree with all of them. But one of the pitfalls is that if you're going to be saving seeds, you got to make sure that the plant that you saved the seeds from was not cross-pollinated by another variety that's in the same family. So every year I grow Georgia candy roaster squash, and they're like they're sort of a pinkish, peach-colored, long, narrow, tapered sort of squash. And really good tasting flesh. And they keep pretty good, not the best for storage, but they'll keep a number of months, let's say 3 to 4 months, if everything works out right. Maybe a little longer, maybe a little less, right? But very good eating, and they're an open pollinated variety of squash. They've been around for a very long time. So if you grow Georgia candy roaster squash and they're pollinated by other Georgia candy roaster squash, and you save those seeds, you'll get Georgia candy roaster squash. And so every year I grow Georgia candy roaster squash, and I don't, cover them in a mesh or anything like that. I just plant them in a different part of my garden than the other kinds of squash, hoping that whatever squash I choose, usually the biggest, fattest, best looking one is the one I save the seeds from, right? Because I always think, well, that one grew really well. I want to save the seeds from it. Hoping that even if that plant was pollinated by some other kind of squash, in that year, the resulting squash will just look like the parent and resemble the parent in every way. But if it's cross-pollinated, the plant that grows from the seed of that plant will be a hybrid. And you don't know what characteristics it's going to retain from the parent. You may not even know who both parents are. I mean, this is from last year. These are seeds I think I saved from last year. I could be wrong. These could be from another year, right? Because I keep terrible records of these things. So here's what a Georgia candy roaster squash is: a long, narrow, peach-colored squash. Really good tasting flesh, just wonderful. Keeps pretty well. When I planted my Georgia candy roaster seeds, I got this. Ain't what they look. This has the right color. It's the exact same color as Georgia candy roaster, but the shape is not the shape. Not even close, right? And I don't know what they crossed with. I have no clue. So I mean, last year when I was growing my Georgia candy roasters, I had a kind of jack-o'-lantern pumpkin, not a good eating pumpkin at all, but one that just grows really fast and big. And this is certainly bigger than most. This is a good size, So I grew Georgia candy roaster squash, jack-o'-lantern, kind of, big fat orange pumpkin type thing, and another kind of plant called a sweet mama, which is a kind of a hybrid squash. I can't remember the name. There's a name for the type of squash. I'll put it up on the screen. I just can't remember the variety, right? It's sort of round, globe-shaped one, sweet mama. So that Georgia candy roaster could have cross-pollinated with any of those, or maybe I got a neighbor down the street growing squash, and some bee or some other insect came along that had been in and around that plant, and you just don't know, right? So here I've got this kind of neat squash, and actually you can see couple wounds there where a bear tried to eat it, right? Anyway, we just had one of these, you know, yesterday was, well, I guess today technically is Canadian Thanksgiving, but we had our big over-the-top meal yesterday, and we had one of these. And the flesh, I have to say, I was really happy with the flesh of it. It was very dry, not as sweet as it could be, but like you can just tell it had all the qualities of a squash that stores really well. Kind of dry, low humidity, you know, like the flesh of a acorn squash. I would say it was like that, right? So good eating, you know, great qualities. In terms of opening the thing up, the seed cavity was quite small. Like for a squash this size, the seed cavity might be slightly larger than a softball, right? So you get a lot of flesh. So it's a good plant. Now the plants aren't particularly prolific. I'm kind of noticing around here, I'm getting one of these per plant. So there's that side effect, right? But so when you have two plants cross-pollinate, right? In that year, the plant that results looks just like the parent. You don't know cross-pollinations happen. It's when you save the seeds of that great plant that looks just like the parents. Those seeds, if it's been cross-pollinated, you know, you just don't know what you're going to get, but it's unlikely they're going to resemble one parent or the other. It's going to be some combination of characteristics from each parent plant. And that's what I've got here. I've got this hybrid squash with no name. I'm going to call it bear squash because I got two of them that a bear tried to eat. And it's reasonably good eating, and we'll see how it goes. But even then, so hey, I've got a new squash that the world has never seen before, and it's the greatest squash ever, and it's got all these great qualities. If I save the seeds from this is a hybrid now, right? I've hybridized two varieties, and I don't know what the other one is. So I don't know what I'm going to get if I save the seeds of these, right? A hybrid variety, it's very rare that the seeds remain true to type. So let's say I save the seeds out of this. This is my biggest, fattest one. Let's say I save the seeds out of this and plant them next year. And it's the only thing I plant, so I make sure that it won't cross with anything else. I don't know what those are going to look like until they mature into a plant. I don't know if they're going to be bigger or smaller. I don't know if they're going to be more or less pest or disease resistant. I don't know if they're going to taste better or worse. I don't know if they're going to keep longer or not as well. I have no idea what I'm getting, right? So, you know, I am going to say I've got a big garden, so I have the space to play like this, right? So I am going to save the seeds of this Franken squash and see what happens with them next year. I can't help it. I have to, right? I mean, look at this thing. It's magnificent. And it's good eating. It looks like a pumpkin, but it's good eating, right? Looks like a jack-o'-lantern, right? It's a good size. And this is growing here in a sort of relatively shady spot. Imagine if I gave this thing some real estate. I wonder what kind of size I would get, right? But anyway, I have no idea what's going to result from putting seeds from this thing in the ground. No clue at all, right? So, you know, I will buy seeds next year. And if I want Georgia Candy Roaster, I'll have to buy those seeds as well. And they're a great variety to buy, by the way, if you've never tried them before. They get big and they taste great. And they store well. So anyway, just a few thoughts. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much there, and hopefully that made sense. Seed saving, it's a great idea, but if you're going to do it, you have to take steps to make sure that it doesn't want to cross-pollinate with another plant. And since you need the plant to be pollinated to become a squash, it becomes more complicated. You got to somehow get the plant pollinated without it cross-pollinating with something else. I mean, one easy solution is to only grow one variety of squash in your garden and just cross your fingers that you haven't got a neighbor growing squash too close by, right? The chances are very slim that a bee will come from some other property unless they're right next door. It's not impossible, right? But it's slighter than if you have a different variety growing right next door, right? Also, like you may want to just cover the whole thing with a mesh and do all the pollination yourself, right? Get a little feather and stick it on the male and stick it on the female and, you know, do the work yourself if you're into that sort of thing, right? But for me, it's fun to just play, and you know, the world hasn't collapsed. We still have civilization. We can still buy seeds. Also, in any given year, I want to grow more than one kind of squash. I like having 2 or 3 or 4. If I had more room, I'd grow 10 different types of squash. I mean, they're so fun to grow. They get so big, and they all look so different, and some of them really good eating. And this time of year, I really can't, you know, from about October until when my kids start to complain, but end of March, early April, squash is like, we eat squash once a week because you got so much and it keeps so well, right? I couldn't speak for a much easier thing to grow in terms of like, you stick the seed in the ground, you hardly do anything, and then you just cut it off and stick it on a shelf somewhere indoors and it keeps for months, right? But anyway, you want to save seeds for your squash, that's great, but understand that, you know, it might not, if your life's depending on it, right? If you have a variety that's very precious to you, and you want to ensure that it doesn't get crossed with something else and lose its desirable characteristics, you got to take a lot of steps to make sure that doesn't happen. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com, and until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.